Washington - Michael T. Flynn, President Trump's first national security advisor, may have violated federal law by not fully disclosing his business dealings with Russia when seeking a security clearance to work in the White House. Top House oversight lawmakers from both parties asserted on Tuesday. The revelation came after Representative Jason Chaffetz, Republican of Utah and chairman of the House Oversight Committee, and other lawmakers on the panel examined classified documents related to Mr. Flynn, including a form he filled out in January 2016 to receive his security clearance. The form is known as NSF-86 and is required by anyone in the government who handles classified information. As part of the review, Representative Elijah E. Cummings of Maryland, the committee's senior Democrat, said Mr. Flynn did not disclose in those documents payments totaling more than $45,000 he received from the Russian government for giving a speech in Moscow in 2015, among others. The development is the latest trouble for Mr. Flynn, who also did not disclose payments from Russian-linked entities on a financial disclosure form the Trump administration released in late March. Earlier in March, Mr. Flynn filed papers acknowledging he worked as a foreign agent last year representing the interests of the Turkish government, causing another uproar and more unfavorable headlines for the Trump administration. Mr. Flynn was forced out as National Security Advisor in February after revelations he had misled Vice President Mike Pence and other top officials about his conversations last year with the Russian ambassador to the United States. 10 weeks later, he continues to be a distraction for the White House. Mr. Chaffetz said Mr. Flynn appeared to have inappropriately accepted payments from companies linked to Russia without first getting required approval from the Pentagon and the State Department. Such payments might violate the Emoluments Clause of the Constitution, which prohibits former military officers like Mr. Flynn, a retired 3-star Army general, from receiving money from a foreign government without consent from Congress. As a former military officer, you simply cannot take money from Russia, Turkey, or anybody else, Mr. Chaffetz said. And it appears as if he did take that money. It was inappropriate, and there are repercussions for a violation of law. Robert Kellner, Mr. Flynn's lawyer, played down the significance of the allegations. He did not comment on the committee's charge that Mr. Flynn had failed to disclose the information on the security forms. In a statement, Mr. Kellner said that Mr. Flynn had notified the Defense Intelligence Agency, which Mr. Flynn once led, that he was taking the 2015 trip to Russia. He received a security briefing from agency officials before he left, which is customary for former top agency officials when they travel overseas. In addition to making the speech on that trip, for which he received the $45,000 fee from RT, formerly known as Russia Today, a Kremlin-backed news network. Mr. Flynn attended the network's lavish anniversary dinner, and was photographed sitting at the elbow of President Vladimir V. Putin of Russia. Questions persist about why the White House did not vet Mr. Flynn more carefully and take steps to make sure his security forms were filled out properly. White House officials refused a request from the committee to turn over other internal documents related to the hiring and firing of Mr. Flynn, which would shine more light in particular on his links to Turkey. In an April 19 letter to Mr. Chaffetz and Mr. Cummings, Mark T. Short, the White House Director of Legislative Affairs, said the administration was withholding the documents. They are likely to contain classified, sensitive and forward/or confidential information. Mr. Short also said the White House could not release documents. The start of the administration on Jan. 20 because officials there do not have them. In short, the White House has refused to provide this committee with a single piece of paper in response to our bipartisan request. And that is unacceptable, Mr. Cummings said. Sean Spicer, the White House press secretary, said Tuesday that to ask for every call or contact that a national security advisor made is pretty outlandish, if you will. The Defense Intelligence Agency is separately reviewing whether Mr. Flynn reported all foreign travel and contacts required to maintain his security clearance. While all former directors maintain a clearance, the agency suspended his access to classified information pending their review. In March, congressional investigators led by Mr. Cummings revealed Mr. Flynn had been paid more than $65,000 by companies linked to Russia in 2015, which included the $45,000 speaking fee from RT. Mr. Flynn also came under scrutiny for belatedly filing papers after his departure from the Trump administration, registering as an agent. His work last year lobbying on behalf of Turkey in a dispute with the United States government. He was paid more than $500,000. Mr. Chaffetz, who announced last week that he would not run for re-election, and Mr. Cummings said they did not plan to call Mr. Flynn before their panel, deferring to a continuing Pentagon investigation and the House Intelligence Committee, which is leading the House's investigation into Russian interference in the election. Mr. Flynn has offered to be interviewed by House and Senate investigators in exchange for immunity from prosecution. A spokeswoman for Representative K. Michael Conaway of Texas, the new Republican head of the House investigation, declined to comment on Tuesday on whether the Oversight Committee's findings had spurred additional interest in Mr. Flynn's testimony. The discovery came as Congress returned from a 2-week recess, during which lawmakers involved in the investigations sought to reset after weeks of partisan infighting. On Tuesday, the Senate Judiciary Committee announced it had invited Sally Q. Yates, the former acting Attorney General, and James R. Clapperidge, the former Director of National Intelligence, to testify next month on Russian interference. Meanwhile, members of the Senate investigation fought off reports of its own troubles. A current and former official, both of whom have knowledge of the Senate investigation, disputed recent reports that the inquiry had stalled, but acknowledged that some Democrats on the committee have been frustrated with its pace and were pressing to move faster.